also from Ms. Sobel's class, communication class, and they're going to be taking frantic notes here and everything. But Mr. Trujillo is going to be talking to us about some of the really neat things that have been going on over the past 3 years, and it's kind of a let's pat ourselves on the back kind of presentation. I think it's rare that we do that, and I appreciate this opportunity for him to share with us. And then he'll be introducing Mary Ann Stroh, who will be talking about Proposition 98.
We're going to take this, and it's going to be on for the faculty tomorrow. So you're going to get the whole thing. The abbreviated version for small people. Kind of remember that story about the minister that did that? Have you ever heard the story about the minister? He walked into church, and there was one old farmer there in the congregation, and he decided, well, maybe I shouldn't even give this sermon. And so he asked the farmer, he says, "What do you think?" He says, "I came, and I'm here." And so he said, "Okay, I guess you're right." He said, "I can't bother about the people who didn't come." So he proceeded to give the whole sermon, and wow, what a joke, forget it. Had to do with a cow and milking that, forget it. That was...
Do we have that on tape?
Okay, now you can roll. About a month ago, I was asked to do a presentation at a national conference here in town, and most of the time when I'm asked to do something for that kind of group, it either has to do with a couple of things that we've been doing in the district that we're getting to be pretty well known for. One is either the dropout recovery program through our Plato centers, or it could be technology and the use of technology in the instructional programs. And those seem to be two things that a lot of people are keenly aware that we're doing in the district. But in this particular instance, and that's what I was invited to talk about. In fact, they wanted to get two of the things together, and they wanted me to talk about dropouts and the relation and the use of technology in helping dropouts. So I was getting a little bored with the topic, and B, I had a little concern that I did not want to go out and portray the Sweetwater High School District as the dropout recovery district of the world, because that assumes that if you have a lot of kids that you're recovering, that assumes that you have a lot of kids that are dropping out. And so that could be a real trap in itself. So anyway, I asked the staff to prepare to give me some information about some other things that might be helpful in that particular talk. And Tris Hubbard gave me some information that he had been collecting. And I was so startled with that information that I decided to use that information. I did some charts and subsequently did some slides on it. And then I shared the information with the district office staff at our monthly meeting. And the district office staff was a little bit taken in by the information. And so then Jeff Schaefer came to me and he said, that was a good meeting we had this morning. You really ought to share that with all the faculty. So that's why I'm here. I come every year to one faculty meeting. This year I was not intending to do that. I was intending to do something else. I was intending to maybe meet with you spend a whole day at a school and meet with you by conference periods, but I ran out of time with some other issues. So anyway, I thought that probably Jeff was correct. And so Mary Ann and I are spending a lot of time this month getting to all the faculties. I think we're about halfway there. And so if I try not to bore myself. It's the same talk I'm doing now for about 10 faculties, and I got 8 more to go. But what this is, let's start about 3 or 4 years ago. We tried to put together a mission statement for the district. As you know, the literature of effective schools and so forth says that you ought to have mission statements. And the popular literature of management says you have to have mission statements. So I didn't want to be left out of the crowd, so we developed a mission statement. Let me remind you of that mission statement if you've never heard it, or if you heard it, you forgot it. The mission statement was that our mission was to significantly increase the number of students graduating from our high schools and prepared to enter a 4-year college and university. And probably those who work around me hear that more often than those who work a little bit more remotely from it. The first part, let me parse that out for you. The first part of that mission statement really dealt with the whole issue of the dropout. 4 years ago, we did some research on the number of youngsters dropping out of our schools. And to the best, the most accurate count we could come up with, we had 2,200 students every year that dropped out of the Sweetwater schools. multiply that times 4 in a 4-year period of high school youngsters' career, and that's 8,800 students. Now, the district I had just come from was only 6,500 kids in high school, so this was larger than the district that was in school that I had administered. It would have become the second largest district or the third largest district in the South Bay with that number of students. It was an alarming number. So we decided that that was the first challenge that we need to meet, and that is to do something about dropouts. And as you know, our major effort at that has been the Plato Centers. And we put together the first Plato Center at Sweetwater High School, and from that we have grown to 6 high school Plato Centers, 1 junior high, the only junior high Plato Center in the country. Those 6 senior high school Plato Centers recover approximately 2,000 youngsters every year who have dropped out of school. And as such, it is probably the largest program of its kind in the country, and the most successful. Bill Honig has pointed to us in many of his speeches, and the dropout conference in San Diego, I understand you point out again, the work that was being done at Sweetwater. So that is a wonderful thing that I think is happening. The customer market for that, however, is still pretty vast. We reduced the number of youngsters who are dropping out of school from approximately 2,200 to about 1,500 this last year. We estimate now that about 1,500 are dropping out of school. So you can still say that's still a significant number of youngsters dropping out of school. We really haven't put in any formal, constructive sense, a dropout prevention program until this year. And our first attempt at that, the first step in the dropout prevention program, is our care center at the old Saxon building. And the idea behind that care center is that youngsters who are having problems need to have thorough assessment before we provide prescriptions. The analogy I began to use was that if you went to the doctor and you were ailing, and you walked in, the doctor said, "Doctor, I'm ailing," and the doctor said, "Well, take an aspirin." And you'd say, "Okay, I'll take an aspirin," go away, come back and say, "Doctor, I'm still hurting." And he'd say, "Well, we'll give you a shot." And he'd give you a shot of something or other, and you'd go away, and you still didn't, the problem was still with you, and you'd come back and say, "Well, why don't we take off an arm or a leg?" And by that time, you'd say, "Wait a minute, don't you want to know where I'm hurting, or what do you think, what's wrong with me? Do you want to check me out?" And we wouldn't put up with that in a medical situation, but somehow we are able to deal with that and accept it in an educational setting. I guess we believe that we're very good. We can look into a youngster's eyes, have looked at his characteristics, his behavior, and say, "Well, I know what's wrong with him. This is what's wrong with him. He either needs this or that, and here's the remedy." And we prescribe. And our remedies have been very limited, unfortunately. Continuation school, opportunity classes, referrals to outside agencies, and so forth. And one of the things that the Care Center is trying to do is to develop an assessment program so we can thoroughly assess youngsters who have problems, and then we can develop the prescription. But not to give the prescription before we even know what's really wrong, or to do a very cursory analysis and then give them the prescription, or at least the program. Now, again, the Care Center is probably the first of its kind in the country, and we're going to be looking at it very, very carefully and working with it quite extensively over the next few years. But that was the dropout. That was the first part of the mission statement. The second part of the mission statement dealt with the notion that these youngsters should be prepared to enter for college and university. For that one, I think everybody jumped on the dropout bandwagon and said, "That's okay, that's a good thing." But what is Trujillo talking about here in the South Bay? Does he know what's here? Doesn't he know that our kids, many of them don't even speak English or function in English? Doesn't he know that we have a very highly mobile population? Doesn't he know that our students are socioeconomically deprived? They come from parents who are very apathetic, have very low educational backgrounds. These kids are poor. Go to college? Come on. Not only that, he must be against vocational education. He's certainly against community colleges because he said four-year colleges are, in fact, a trustee of the community college called one of my board members and said, when I made that statement, when I used that mission statement, that I had spoken out against community colleges. That's how much criticism I was receiving the first year when I put out that mission statement. From not everybody, but from some people. It was never my intention that every youngster go to college. It was never my intention that youngsters not learn vocational trades. It was never my intention that they not go to community college. My intention and purpose of that second statement was a standard of performance. And the easiest standard of performance for high school people to understand and for community people to understand is not the 36th percentile of such and such and such, but the entrance requirements for the University of California. In those entrance requirements, they're very clearly spelled out what they are, what the courses are, what the grade point averages should be, what the test averages, scores should be for youngsters. So there should be no mistake what the standard of performance that we expect of every youngster that goes through our schools, unless they happen to be of a severely handicapped nature and so forth. But for most youngsters, the ability to enter the University of California or the four-year college university should be the standard of graduation for youngsters. If they want to go to college, that's their jolly choice. It is not ours to prevent them or channel them somewhere else. It is too young and the society too complicated for us to be making those decisions at the age of 16 and 17. And we know that the society is moving in those directions. Well, that was the mission statement. Another thing that we tried to do is last year, I discovered over the 2 or 3 years and the 30-some years working in schools that we tend to run schools with large volumes of materials, either memorandum or we have policy books that are this thick. And for the most part, it's an ironic situation in our state of life that those of us who are engaged in the teaching of reading and who are engaged in disseminating information and knowledge through the act of through the medium of the printed word tend to have a very, very strong aversion to the printed word. And so we don't read those policy books, we don't read the memorandum, we don't read all this garbage. As a matter of fact, I brought a book here, a box of materials here at Bonita Vista Junior 2 years ago to our last principal's meeting. And it was a big box, and it strained my back, and I'm now on workman's comp for carrying that box. And I poured that box out, and in that box was contained every form that we use in this district. And it was a big box. And it was only one copy of every form. I took up this big box, and I dumped it on the table, and Manny was there, and I told the principals, I said, this is garbage. This is garbage, the way we're running this operation with this kind of system. So I began to think about how one can run a large, complicated system, or how a large, complicated system runs, rather than how one runs it. And thought about, the Christianity, the whole last 2,000 years of our civilized history was formed on 10 simple principles, the 10 commandments. Not everybody follows them. Churches have confessionals for people who violate them. There's a lot of issues involved, but they are principles that have, for the most part, been able to develop the civilizations, the nations, if you will, that we have developed over the last 2,000 years. And in this country, we developed probably the most model society of all through, again, 10 very simple principles called the Bill of Rights, which, if you look at the Bill of Rights, they have quite a bit to do with the 10 Commandments. So I thought, well, people live with these kinds of things. They seem to be able to function. Civilizations grow up, laws have developed, and so forth. So we developed, with the board, 3 principles for our district. And I want to start there to share the information with you. Yeah?
Sure, Bob.
That's a very simple thing. The superintendent should know. But it doesn't work without. Why don't I use these principles to set the stage for the thing I'm going to share with you? Where am I going to find it? Going back. Okay. Let's go to the first one. Not necessarily any order. The first one, it's almost like a cliche, respect for the individual. But you'll see later on that it does have some meaning. I want to share a story with you about that. When we developed this principle, it was 2 years ago, and about the same time. And what I had told the staff was that we wanted to use these principles to guide us in everything we did. Instead of writing to the policy book and looking up chapter and verse as to what we had to do, instead of going to find somebody's memo that was a CYA memo or something else, we didn't have to do that. We could remember these 3 principles and have those guide us in what we did. So we had a particular meeting in which the state minimum wage laws had changed. It had been changed upwards. And it was brought to our attention, and we discussed it, and the other item that was brought to our attention was that we were not subject to the state minimum wage laws. We were only subject to the federal minimum wage laws. And so the federal laws hadn't changed, we didn't have to raise our minimum wage. And so it looked like that was a slam dunk, and we went on, and we don't have to do anything. Then we stopped, and we asked the question, what do we want to do? We have just adopted these principles. What do they mean? And so this principle had some words to it. It says we care about the rights and needs of every person in the organization, not just when it serves our purposes. And we said, now, who in our district is paid a minimum wage? Are they the most affluent? Are they the administrators? Are they us? No. Who are they? Cafeteria workers who work part-time and don't even get fringe benefits. The most needy people in our own society are those folks. And yet every day they come and prepare the food for our children. And if one of them didn't observe good hygiene, we would have a horrendous epidemic of disease among our students. That's an important job, isn't it? And yet we're paying the minimum wage. And because the state law says, because the laws say we don't have to change, is that what we want to do? And we said no. We want to follow this principle, and because these folks are there when we need them, we should be there when they need us. And so we changed the minimum wage for those individuals without having to do it. That's the kind of use of the principle we should do. All individuals are treated with dignity and have their needs attended to. I think that could be applied almost everywhere. And I'm not talking just about employees here with these principles. This means that parents, the students, everybody in touch with our organization, we should abide by that respect for the individual. Sometimes people get confused about that. Some people don't do their job sometimes very well. You call them in, you call that to their attention. They may even lose their job and they say to you, well, whatever happened to respect for the individual? Well, wait a minute. You know, this is not a one-way street. Respect for the individual doesn't also mean treat me the way I want to be treated, or favor me or anything else. It says what those words say in a very literal sense. Second principle is commitment to improving the future. This is my 33rd year in education, and I started out in 1956 in a small school, junior senior high school up in north of Los Angeles, in a town called New Hall, William S. Hart High School. I graduated from the University of San Francisco, and I had received $4,200, which was the highest salary of any teacher coming out of the University of San Francisco that year. And so for 33 years, I have sat in faculty lounges, heard it, and probably participated in the woe is me syndrome. We are underpaid, overworked, disrespected, unappreciated, etc. And to a great degree, that's probably true of our profession. Sometimes I think we are like the Jewish people in pre-war Germany, the scapegoats for all of the society's ills. And today we see the Secretary of Education and other people blasting us, the industry blasting education, as if we had created the problems, as if we had the solutions to the problems with underfunded schools, etc. So this principle was created or developed because we wanted to present to our group, to our organization, that there was something beyond the material, the mundane, the physical environment that ruled our lives and gave us a purpose, a reason for being who we are and continuing to do the work we do. And I wanted to especially emphasize that it was everybody, all of us, who determined that future, the quality of the students, and they then determined the quality of our communities. I want to share with you another story about that. The other day, a few months ago, I was invited to visit by a teacher to visit her classroom at Trujillo Junior. And I was finally urged by my staff that I had to go there and visit this classroom. And it just so happened that as I approached the classroom, the principal was taking me there, and my administrative assistant was with me, Lynn Young. As we walked into the classroom, I had just gotten my glasses that afternoon, my new glasses that afternoon. I had them on, and I said, my goodness, this is the first time I had a frame of reference there. And the floor was tilted. And I took my glasses off, and I said, this guy just did a lousy job on my lenses. And I looked, and the floor is still tilted. And so Lynn Young, who's very good lady, she kind of poked me and she says, don't say anything, don't embarrass anybody. She says, this was the district laundry. That's why the floor slopes. Oh, I said, so I walked in the room. Here was this teacher, fantastically animated. She's a journalism teacher, Trujillo Junior. And she wanted me to visit the classroom, not to gripe, not to tell me woe is me, but she wanted me to see this classroom and was so proud and wanted to relate to me how appreciative she was for our carpenters and maintenance people for the remodeling job that they had done in that classroom. And she took me around to the dark room, every nook and corner, and showed me every detail that had been done by our custodian, by our maintenance people. Her husband was sitting in an adjacent, a little alcove over there working on a computer, almost a full-time volunteer, so we were getting 2 people for 1. And this teacher was so animated about her situation, her environment, that animation and that energy went on into her students. I then decided that I had seen something that I never thought I'd see in this district, that kind of praise for our maintenance people. So I called them together and told them that story and went over these principles with them. I think you've seen the change in our maintenance performance in this district in the last 2 years. I used to come around the school districts and I'm telling you, I would absolutely go crazy when I would see a piece of aluminum conduit or a stainless steel conduit running down a classroom across a window and no attention to the courtesy, so forth. I remember one time when I looked at the trailers in this district and I said to our business manager, I said, unless you can prove to me that those trailers are more cost effective than relocatable classrooms, I want those trailers removed and I want relocatable classrooms put in place. And then I went on, I shouldn't have said this, and I went on to say, because, I said, I think those trailers are a statement of disrespect for the people who teach in them and the students who attend class there. So I wanted to share that with you because everybody's job, how that job is done, it affects everybody and finally affects the students, you the teachers. Finally, the third principle is dedication to excellence, another almost cliche today. And so we use a cliche almost to explain it. Each individual is expected to do his task at his or her highest level of performance. I think that's an expectation you have with kids and so forth. Well, let me go on. What about that mission statement? What about these 3 principles? Are they working? Let's take a look. 1985-86, we had 861 kids take the SAT. Most of them probably were from Bonita High School. And last year, 1,322 took the SAT. We put this particular thing on the principal's evaluation. Every principal is evaluated, high school principals evaluated, and the number of kids who take the SAT and some other factors. So if they're on your backs, you know why, because I'm on theirs. And because, notice that we started in 85-86. That's significant to me, may not be to you. Why didn't we have, because I couldn't find statistics, we don't have them for 84, 85, or 83, 84, or 82, 83, 82, or whatever. Why? Could it be that we didn't think our kids played on that playing field? Could it be that our scores were nothing to write home about? Could it be that we didn't want to acknowledge this issue? Maybe we just didn't have the information. I want to be fair about it. But it's significant to me that we didn't keep tabs of this kind of data while the rest of the world was breathing in the SATs and breathing out the SATs. We didn't seem to think that was an important issue for us for some reason where we kept that data. I went to college, a school of education, as you did. And at the feet of the great professors, we were taught several kinds of precepts. One of those precepts was that the more people who take IQ or achievement tests or any test of quality, we have a sure thing that those test scores are going to be. So when I asked the principals when I told them that this was going to be under evaluation, many of them protested and said, but you know our test scores are going to go down. And I said, you're right, because I too believe those professors. And I said, but don't worry about it. I'm not going to penalize you. I'm not going to criticize you if your test scores go down. I only want more kids taking the SAT. I want to present this chart to you because this is the result of last year's SAT. And I don't want to draw conclusions from the chart necessarily. I just want to present to them. Notice that here at this high school, the number of kids, you folks did your job, the number of kids who took the SATs went up. And sure enough, Professor Know-it-all was correct. The test scores went down. The next school, Castle Park High School, the number of kids who took the SAT went down, and as expected, the test scores went up. But look at the third school, Trujillo High School. The number of kids who took the SAT went up, the test scores went up. The next one, there's a mistake. Actually, the number of kids who took the SAT went down, so it's the same profile as Castle Park High School at the top. Test scores went up. That 152 should be in red, that's the only difference. Mar Vista High School is almost a replica of Castle Park and Hilltop High School. Number of kids taking the SAT went down, test scores went up. Montgomery and Southwest had a little mixed results, and look at Sweetwater High School. Number of kids taking the SAT went up, test scores went up. All I wanted to show is this, that there are always trailblazers. There are always people who say, I can break the 4-minute mile or jump over the 7-foot barrier. And I'm not going to say that the principal or the faculty at Chula Vista High School or Sweetwater High School said that to themselves. I don't know where it happened. Maybe it was the kids, maybe it was the chemistry, maybe it was the principal, maybe it was the faculty. I don't know. But my point is here with this slide is that it ain't necessarily so. That in fact, if more people take the SAT, it doesn't necessarily follow that the test scores need to go down. That there may be some other factors, and what we need to do is find out what those factors are. And build on the notion that we can put more of our kids on the SAT, take the SAT, and that our test scores don't necessarily have to go down. And that we can have an important part in that intervention to make sure that that's not there. In 1984-85, we did keep records, and we had 2,547 graduates, and last year we had 2,832. Of those 2,400 graduates, as you see, 775 went on to the community, mostly local community college. The next line says San Diego State University, but it also, in this particular slide, includes all of the state university campuses. And you can see the growth between 845 to 87, 88. Then there's a big blank there, and again, it's almost significant. Almost like I need to comment on that because, again, we didn't keep statistics on the UC system or the private school system. I don't know if they weren't available, or again, we had kind of an institutional attitude that that was not a place where our kids belong, or maybe we could name them because there were so few and we could actually pronounce their names. Remember my number? I don't know. I don't want to be cynical. So I put 997 plus to account for that missing number. And no matter how many are in that missing number, look at the number, the bottom line for last year, 2,200 kids going on to college. Folks, that's a tremendous achievement. And I came here today to tell you, to praise you, because I didn't teach a single kid and I didn't counsel a single kid. You did. At the high schools of this district, this is where that figure came from. Now pops the cynics again. And some cynics will say, but most of those kids are going to community college. Well, so what? Community college, nobody said community colleges were inferior institutions. I had 5 of my students, 3 of my kids graduated from the University of California. And frankly, I think most of them would have been better off going to community college rather than right into the large UCLA and Cal Berkeley campuses. But they made it through. The second question is going to be, well, yeah, you've got 2,200 kids. Will they stay there? Or how many units are they taking? The cynics will say, well, my answer to the cynics is, hey, big deal. What's the difference? At least now they're getting in. And our job ceased when we qualified them to go there and counsel them to get there. Somebody else has to take over from there. We can't follow these kids to the grave. Somebody else has to pick up the load. And yes, some of these kids will drop out of college because they got homesick. Others will get married. Others will party too much and drop out of school because they didn't keep their grades. Others will not have maybe the motivation. Others will find other diversions. And some of these kids will drop out. But the college dropout rate, as I was talking about our dropout rate, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% today. And yet we're the ones taking the rap for what happens to the society and education. One of the things that was said was that our kids were poor and maybe they couldn't access college. This is the amount of money that our kids earned in grants and scholarships last year, our graduates, those 220 kids. And the cynic jumps up again and says, yeah, but the reason we got so much money is our kids are poor and so they get these state assistance grants. And I have to look at those cynics and say, hey, most of your fathers, and myself included, went to college and got our education, post-secondary education on states on public assistance grants. It's called the GI Bill, or some other thing. Or maybe it was called the University of California, because the University of California is supported by the taxpayers of the state of California. Yet only 12.5% of the population, the graduating population, is admitted to the University of California, and so I presume that the parents of the other 88% are supporting the 12%. And since the demographics of the University of California don't show that the lower socioeconomic classes abound in those universities, then I've got to assume that it's the poor who have been educating the rich through the University of California. So let's not denigrate our youngsters if they happen to be poor. They're on their way. Well, the next question is, was that a flash in the pan? Was it a blip on the chart? These are the kids who are in your classes right now who will be graduating this June. Oops. Blew it up. This was going to, remember it was 222 in 1945 at San Diego State University and all the other state college systems. This slide only deals with a single campus here in San Diego. 574 kids are our students have applied to enter this fall. These kids are not on a fishing expedition. Every one of them has the requirements to enter that university. Some of them will not enter the university, or those Stanford, Shell, other places. Of those 574 folks, they kind of Katie remarked a while ago that maybe in 1984 most of the kids taking an SAT were from Bonita Vista High School. That's changed, and you need to know that. Of these 574 youngsters who are applying for San Diego State admission this fall, 132 are from Sweetwater High School. The second largest number in San Diego County, second only by a few students to Mira Mesa High School, which has 700 students more than Sweetwater High School. Sweetwater High School has more kids applying to San Diego State this fall than any school in our district and any other school in San Diego County except Mira High School. Yet, I would have to say that the profile of Sweetwater High School student body is very much the profile that I was given 4 years ago. Poor, the bilingual, the mobile, the apathetic parent, etc., etc. Yet somehow, something magical is happening. You saw the SATs for Sweetwater High School. And I didn't come here to compare Sweetwater and Bonita. I think all of us, all of you, share in that kind of success story. When I presented these figures at the Del Coronado, I was sandwiched in between two very dramatic speakers, Jaime Escalante of Stand and Deliver fame, and George McKenna of the George McKenna story, also a very dramatic story of turnaround school. And so when I started my talk, I said, what I have to present here is not drama, because people make movies of drama. What we have here is a large institution, 27,000 students, a large workforce, 3,100 people, pulling a wagon uphill, a heavy load, and sometimes the wheels aren't even round. And yet that is a steady pull that this district has been able to accomplish in the last couple of years. So what I came to do today is, again, to imitate Mark Anthony, I came to praise Caesar. I came to praise you because you have done this kind of work, and to urge you to continue, because you see now that the fruits of your labor have been successful. You now see that these kids are educatable, that these kids can be mobile upwardly, and that we can, in the Sweetwater District, be the real leader of this state and this southwestern United States, as we show what we can do with kids that most people would say cannot be done. So my thanks to you on behalf of the Board of Trustees, on behalf of the community and the students of the district, because you folks have really been miracle workers. Thank you very much. And I'll introduce Mary Ann Stroh, who's going to talk to you about not a nice subject. Okay?
Well, those of us who work closely with the superintendent in the district office always try and pattern our behavior after his. It's the law of survival there. So I too am going to use technology, at least for the beginning of my presentation. The first half hour of this video was a simple overview of how a built. No, it's not. Very brief. Does that begin brief? Yes. Yes, it does. Very brief video about Prop 98 and what's going on with the implementation of it. Then I have just a few other details at the end of that. I really like the beginning of this. It's a dynamic beginning, and I especially like being the San Diego princess. You'll notice that. Pretty good so far. is real interesting what's going on in Sacramento. As Bob mentioned in the tape, the environment there is very hostile. Education is being blamed for all the cuts that are taking place. There's a lot of lobbying going on with different legislators from special interest groups wanting to know why they're being cut and everything else that's happening. There's a lot of speculation on what money could be coming to schools or should be coming to schools. And it's important to know that there's only one thing out there right now on the table, and that's the governor's proposed budget. And right now, in the governor's budget for education is a whopping 3.21%. Now, you don't have to be a mathematical genius to know that with 3.21%, not in every program, just in certain programs, that it's going to be difficult even to maintain what we've got going, let alone put in new programs or enhance some existing programs that we may have. What AB 98 would do, and here's another interesting story, they're real mad about this because education is such a large portion of the state budget. They've taken away a lot of power from legislators if you define by statute how they have to spend the money. So they're very resentful of that. And so there was one assemblyman who also, I guess a year or two ago, had a bill that was AB 98. Didn't deal with schools at all. That got dropped, I don't know, didn't make it out of committee or some technicality like that. And he got angry that there was this natural tie-in with Prop 98 and AB 98, raised a protest, and in fact won on the technicality. So in the last 2 weeks, AB 98 has now become AB 198. So there could be a lot of confusion as people write letters in support of AB 98, which has nothing to do with schools. So if you're taking notes, write down AB 198. There's an important thing about AB 198, and that is what Bob mentioned on the tape, this across-the-board adjustment for enrollment growth and cost of living in all the categories. I don't know if you're aware of this, we are as we look at the district budget, but transportation, school transportation, has for years and years not received an adjustment for enrollment growth and not received any cost of living adjustment. So that annually cuts into the general budget of the district. What AB 198 would say, that's one of those categorical areas that transportation, we need to adjust that. To us, it's significant. Now, the good news is that without Prop 98, if it gets implemented, we were scheduled to be cut in education about $400 million. Now, a quick and dirty thing, now the mathematicians are going to carry out the decimal points and all that. Quick and dirty thing when you talk about big numbers is that if you figure for every $100 million that they talk about at the state level, that translates to about $1 million to our district, which translates to about 1%. So as you're thinking about percents available and all of that, every $1 million in our district is about 1%, and every $1 million here is about $100 million at the state level. Which brings me to the next point. Every year, maybe you've run into this, those of you that deal with budgets or purchasing things, sometimes at the end of one fiscal year, before the start of the other, you purchase things for the next year, it gets charged to the other budget, you kind of dip in the red for about a week or two so you cross over to the next fiscal year budget. It's a common thing that happens. It's not that anybody's overspent or underspent or anything. And that happens every year at the state level with the education budget. And every year, because of the transfer of the budgets and all of that, education dips in to the state reserve for about $40 million annually. One of the things that Prop 98 said is that the governor could establish a prudent reserve. Well, the governor has determined that from Prop 98 money, a prudent reserve to account for this annual shortfall is $220 million. So $220 million right off the top of Prop 98 is set aside in a prudent reserve by the governor, in his proposed budget. The other thing that happened was that the community colleges were left out of Prop 98. And there was beginning to be a lot of dissension within the educational ranks. Community college is pretty angry that they were like stepchildren in this. And rather than have the troops divided, there's been a deal struck with K-12 to bring in the community colleges, and another deal that the first $84 million off the top will go to community colleges. So there's $220 million in reserve and another $84 million plucked away to go to community colleges. So you can see people are beginning to chip away at Prop 98 money. So it's getting very tricky. The other thing is, Prop 98 was meant to be a minimum. It was meant to be the base by which we did our planning, our stable funding base, so that at least we had some assurance of what we're doing. What's happened now is it's being considered the maximum. And so people are saying, you passed 98, you want it, here's what you asked for, here's what you got. And in addition to that, we know that there are other programs, other needs that schools have, people coming up with innovative ideas or things that cost money. And what's happening is they're getting real frustrated. You know how many get frustrated with kids or at home and people are badgering about something and you say, I'm not going to deal with that right now, forget it, I'm not going to decide it. I'll give you my answer later. Well, what's happening with every bill that's being introduced in the legislature right now for education that has any money attached to it at all is being put in a suspense file and no action is being taken. Right now, there are bills in a suspense file for education totaling over $2 billion. And I don't know what hopes are in that. There's also whispering going on about suspending the implementation of Prop 98. Because there is a provision in here that says if the governor or if the state legislature determines that there's a financial problem in the state, they can suspend implementation. They don't have to do anything with it. And we hope that won't happen. And there's a lot of lobbying going on, a lot of information going, but there are all kinds of things working against us. Last week, there were people on the steps of the Capitol pleading for mental health. Please, no cuts here. We're going to be on the street. We won't get the services. All kinds of social service agencies saying, don't cut our funds. They're scheduled for a cut. And the legislators are going, well, you know, if it weren't for Prop 98, we wouldn't have to be doing this. We're making a lot of enemies out there. We have the Secretary of Education saying that schools are stagnant. Nothing has been going on in schools for at least 3 years. And we're out there talking to legislators trying to say, hey, look, you know, here's what we're doing, here's the progress we're making. Our teachers are in those classrooms every day. We're dealing with overcrowded classrooms. We don't have enough money for facilities. You know, people, the money's not there. Our programs aren't getting adjusted for cost of living or enrollment. And they're saying, and what are you doing? You know, and then we say, but you know, it was the will of the people. The people in this state passed Prop 98, and you're accountable to them. Guess what? It doesn't play real well with the San Diego contingent because it didn't pass in San Diego County. Prop 98 did not pass here. So the people who elected our local legislators didn't vote for Prop 98. So there are all kinds of arguments against it. I think deep down that people want to do the right thing for education. I think there's so much politics involved in muddying up the Prop 98 issue right now that we're in for some trouble with it. We could be brats about it and we could say, well, you don't give us the money, we're not going to give you the report card. Ha, ha, ha. Well, they've just put that report card as a whole separate thing, detached it from the money issue. And in fact, schools are required, districts will be required by September 30th to have their plan for the report card and issue the first report card in the fall. So we're working on that now. I don't see that as all that bad. Some people are real hung up about it. I think it's going to be a valuable communication tool. Because we're going to have to report test scores, we're going to have to report some of those things that the public jumps on right away. But we also can put other things into that report card that we feel are important for this district and for each of our school sites. So the unique things that are going on, the personality, the things that are happening on campuses here, we're going to be able to put into a formalized communication tool for the community and for parents. And I think that that will be to our benefit in the long run. It's a little hassle putting it together, but you guys don't even have to worry about that. But I have to worry about that in my office. And we have to worry about pulling the data together. But that's not going to be work for, it's not going to be another thing teachers have to do. So I think you can relax about that part. The most important thing is, are we going to get what's coming to us in terms of the money? Because it's not going to be much to us this year. 3.21%. It's not a whopping a lot of money. But later on, I think years down the road, if we can get a stable funding base, and if we can begin to look at the GAN limit, which this has triggered discussion of looking at the GAN limit, and begin to look at adjusting that tax revenue shortfall, then I think we're going to be in good shape. Now, someone the other day raised the issue that they had read in the paper that more money was coming in from the taxes this year in the state. If you reread that very carefully, what it says is that the returns are coming in earlier. The returns are coming in earlier. They still have made this miscalculation, and guess what group it's with? The top 10%. So they're going to have to somehow adjust and tell the top 10%, oops, we made a mistake, we're going to have to raise your taxes. And guess which are the folks that are hardest to deal with and have the strongest lobbies? The folks in the top 10%. So it's going to be a tricky time to adjust that. But I think it can be done. And so we are asking folks to write letters or make phone calls. And it does make a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. And you don't have to spend a lot of time, I know it's a thing, kind of, I have 5 classes a day, I see 185 kids a day, I have papers to grade, I have lessons to plan, I don't have time to be writing these letters. Well, I don't want to break your heart, but they're not going to read your letter. They're going to look at the letter to determine long enough if it's support or oppose. And they put them in 2 stacks. And they look at which stack is bigger. And the staffers will then tell their legislator, we've been getting mail in this office about this issue, and the mail is running more in support than in opposition to the bill. Phone calls, they'll log them in, support or oppose, and they'll say, we've got X number of phone calls, this many are support, this many are oppose. So you don't have to worry about great flowery language. All you have to do is say, please support AB 198, it's important to schools. That's all you have to say. You don't have to say anything more than that. And if you send stacks of mail, they'll weigh them, and they'll say the yes votes weigh 2 tons and the no votes weigh 1 ton. But getting letters, letting them know that people are out there, are watching it, and care about it, does in fact make a big difference. So we've included for you the names and addresses of your local legislators. You can either write a letter as a teacher in the district to Steve Peace and to Bonita because they represent this district, or if you know the representative from the area where you live, you can write to that person as well. Or if you're really ambitious, you can write to all of them. But you don't need to worry about doing that if you don't want to. But it is very, very important. I called Sacramento this morning, and AB 198 has passed out of one committee and is now in the dreaded Ways and Means Committee. And I expect that that'll be a rather long debate on that issue in Ways and Means as they begin to look at the fiscal impact of implementation of that bill. But what we don't want to happen is we don't want it to be suspended. At the very least, we want our 3.21% rather than nothing at all in a cut. So it is important that you do that. Very briefly, it's just a summary here of what the proposition said. The next page is a summary of what AB 198 would do, what's required in the report card, and again, you don't need to worry about that too much. And then just some other information about what you can do and what kind of support there is. It's very encouraging that the diverse groups in education have come together on this issue. I can assure you that there is a lot of lobbying on behalf of education going on. Recently, myself, Kathy Cairns, Patty Sheets, and Linda Wells, representing 3 major organizations in the district, did go to Sacramento, spent 3 days. We talked to everyone we could talk to there. We also met with the lobbyists from those organizations and got the word on what they were doing. So people are there working, but with your help and with your letters, it'll help even more, and we really need it.
Any question? No?
I know there's a lot of information here, and I'm sorry we didn't have some time for some dialogue, but I also know it's late in the afternoon. So we thank Mr. Trujillo and Mary Ann for being with us, and if you do have any questions, Mary Ann's office is always available. The unique position she has, and one that this district needed for a long, long time. So I'm the one who appreciate it. Those letters are real simple to write. They really are. Thank you all for coming, and see you tomorrow.
Good rest.